Hey guys, got a ZVP today, and in the lower left it's going to be me, Rekatan. In the lower right we have my Protoss opponent, Nib. Now the first thing you may notice is I can say S sounds now, so that's pretty cool. I got a SteelSeries, what is it, Siberia V2, and thus far I'm loving it. The audio is great on my end too, from what when I hear through my headset, but you guys can't really tell that. But the one downside is the cones are so large I have a hard time hearing my own voice. So hopefully my voice is the right volume. Fingers crossed. So what we have here is a ZVP where I feel like my opponent went what generally is going to do pretty well. There's a few little things he could have done differently, but I feel like, when everyone asks, well, what counters this? And, my response is always Colossus Blink Stalkers. And this game, I felt like my opponent went into that pretty well. Before the game really gets going, I wanted to mention a few things. First off, I'm really sorry to anyone who I haven't been able to respond to via email or private messages on YouTube or Twitch or, just comments and threads. I feel really bad because I try to respond to everyone, but it's getting to a point that there just isn't enough time since this isn't a full-time job for me. So I really apologize. I appreciate any of the messages or emails you guys send, and I try to respond to most of them, but some of them I'm not able to get to all of them. Also the coaching requests. I've had to stop taking new students for a bit, and so I can't respond to all the coaching requests either, and I'm sorry about that. I'll follow up with you guys when I'm able to open up my coaching again. It's just right now I'm not able to keep up with the demand, which is a good problem to have. It's just I feel bad. So, okay, that's out of the way. We're doing the 11 over pool here, and nothing's really going to change here. Now, I did update my timings a bit later on, and I really like the outcome thus far. And actually, I'm going to switch it onto my camera for a bit. Since this early game, there's not a lot to talk about, so we'll just let the camera do the work. So, we'll see how that plays out, but today, basically, I delayed my gas most of the games just a little bit, and it allowed me to get all 4 extractors much sooner, but the first extractor a little later. So I'm not sure yet. We'll see how that pans out. It feels like what it allows me to do is actually survive a lot better versus the things that have been problematic, such as 5-gate or 1-gate expand into some kind of 4-gate or just various types of cheese, because I'm not trying to squeeze every bit of economy into my gas. I'm able to actually hit all of my spending nice and clean on my larva injects, and that means by the time my infestation pit is finished, my economy is much healthier, and I actually can make more Swarmhosts in the long run, but I don't get them quite as early. But that also allows me to be on 4 queen rather than 3, 2 spines by default rather than just 1, and a spore. So I feel like for a healthier economy and a safer opening, why not, So we'll see how it plays out. The few things that I can theorycraft off the top of my head that might be problematic are going to be any kind of quick third build, where they just know what I'm doing, they've seen my play before, and they go ahead and just take a quick third because they know my 11 over pool does not mean aggression. A later Lair means Lair Swarmhost, means I start applying pressure to their third or natural later. So that's one that I kind of am unsure about. The other one is quick blink stalkers, because I'm also, in that regard, going to have Swarmhost later, and I'm going to be depending on Queen Spinecrawler for that defense. So the one thing is, if I'm not sure what they're doing, I'm going to start allowing myself to go ahead and Overlord Scout rather than waiting for the Overseer. So consistently, I've made that mistake saying, oh man, I'm going quick Overseer. We'll just go ahead and wait another 30 seconds. I think I mentioned that in another cast, but yeah, I'm trying to just completely eliminate that. He's going double forge here, Nib is, so it looks like he's going to be going very upgrade heavy. It's a good call. Not enough Protoss players do this, in my opinion. I feel like really that extra forge goes such a long way, because if you're 3-0-0 to Zerg's 2-2, you are behind on upgrades, and you're behind in a more substantial way than it feels at first glance, because sure, you have +3 attack, but even once you start upgrading your armor, you've still got all those shields being unaffected. So for them to be on 202 when I'm at 22, or 303 when I'm on 22, it's going to be a lot healthier. Now the gas is finally started on my, or is finally finished on my first geyser. Second geyser going up now. I think this is the one where I take the 3rd and 4th gas really quick. Maybe not. I don't know. I played a whole bunch of ZVP today, so I might be getting them all mixed up. So we've started our layer at about 6 minutes 50 seconds. There they are. Started our layer at 6 minutes 50 seconds. So effectively we lost about 30 to 40 seconds on our layer timing. And in exchange, I feel like that economy is just so much healthier, and we're getting that third, fourth, or second, third, and fourth gas all quicker if I would actually saturate them. Saturate. Come on. Yeah. So I think what that means in the long run is going to, or, I already stated that, actually. I think in the long run this is going to be something I can work with in a much more stable fashion, because I was finding that the metagame was starting to change. Everyone, instead of going high macro, was just starting to hit like all sorts of ridiculous gateway timings that hit around 7 or 8 minutes, right as the Swarmhosts were spawning sometimes, which isn't good still, or oftentimes way before the Swarmhosts start spawning, like 6.5 minutes, 7 minutes, barely have started my lair. So we see here, I'm at 56 drones, I've got a Spore and 2 Spines and 4 Queens. And then my infestation pit is starting about 45 seconds later than it normally would be. Nib, I don't know why this scout occurred. Granted, he is working on, where is it? Just played this game today. He is working on Blink, but he's not going to have that nearly in time. So I felt like if there was one, this is, I guess, a small blunder, but it felt like a big blunder at the time, because it's like, you're getting information at what cost? 250 or 225 minerals and 50 gas. That's a big deal. So I think that's what stalkers cost. Man, I'm bad at numbers. I don't know. I guess he just really wanted the information. Now he does know what all's going on. He saw the infestation pit as well. So thus far, even though we're only on 2 base, we're on a very healthy economy. We actually are 1 drone up. There it is. 1 missing from our net, 1 up on our main, 2 up on our main. But that'll get cleaned up here soon. Now, I read Blink Stalker, and I read correctly. I did see it, but I was kind of reading it to be much quicker than it is. He actually turned out to not put any chrono boost in it. This is actually an expand build. So that's fine too. It's just on this map, it's really common for players to go quick Blink Stalker with an Observer or with a Mothership Core, and then they'll just be able to kind of scoot right up that ramp and bypass all of your static defense. So that's why we have this high ground Spore, high ground Spine. It's going to help deal with an Observer coming across. It's going to shut down his ability to blink up ramps or blink up ledges. And then the Spine's just there to help buffer with my Queens. So I am going pure Queen on this, and that's just because I find if I go Hydra versus a Blink Stalker opening, I defend really, really well, but I give them so much room to expand. Whereas in this case, if we check out our units tab, we're on 6 Queens already, so we definitely have quite a bit of buffering units. Now we're on 8 Queens, but we're still able to get that healthy Swarmhost count. Notice we're spending all our gas, and we started our upgrades quite a bit quicker than we would have had we gone Hydra as well. So we actually spent 2.5 Swarmhosts worth of upgrades, or 2.5 Swarmhosts worth of gas, I should say, on upgrades, and we're still able to start the aggression pretty early. We're at 11 minutes here with 7 Swarmhosts and 8 Queens. Now, where's those Overlords? Really need, there it is. Need more like 3 or 4 here. I'd like to start covering up top early on when my Overseer energy has already been spent on scouting. I need to have an Overlord right up here. Now in this case he ran right past the Locust, so this is going to work out just fine. I'm able to pull back. I'm able to punish this a bit even, because he's pushing forward a little bit too much and decides to blink up, but he's just going to lose some shields. No big deal. Now this one I did play earlier today. I'm sorry if some of my casting is a little bit predictive as a result. I didn't watch it since, but I was going to cast another one, but again, every time I wait a week, it feels like my play is just not really, it's not accurate to my play anymore, so it's like I feel like I shouldn't even cast it, because it's like I would just be showing people the wrong thing to do, or at least what I've started to feel is the wrong thing to do. So I'm trying to cast as current of replays as possible while still having a somewhat fresh approach to the casting. It's kind of an odd balance. Alright, so we've got our 3rd established, and from an economy standpoint, we're doing great. I actually overdroned a bit, 75 drones to 56 probes. I'd rather be at about 65 drones. And would also like to have my 4th up and be spining. So this is a situation where I'd like to see myself actually dumping some of these drones into Spores and Spines. Doing a little bit of damage here. We're trying to stay at a distance. Now this is important to gauge. Whenever your opponent's in Blink, rather than going straight into Colossus or Air or something to that effect, you actually want to position your Swarmhost so far back. You basically want them to get 2 or 3 volleys before they expire. Because notice how much time this gives me. Now I'm able to reposition these, and he's going to walk right into some Locusts, and he got the flank off, and he lost probably 500 resources for his trouble. Blink's up here. He's trying to snipe these Queens, but that's where the Transfuse Micro comes into play. This is just always so cost effective because they underestimate your transfuse. They say, oh, well, this guy's a fool, he's making 20 queens. And then they just don't realize that you have infinite health on your queens, so it's kind of fun. I'm undecided as to whether this was the right spawn. As I watched, I mean, sure, I got a cannon and I get a little damage on the Nexus. Actually, I could have focused that Nexus and done quite a bit. Oh, I'm sorry for missing that. I pulled up. I assumed he was going to continue falling back, but he didn't. And this is another mistake of assuming. I finally get a changeling in position so that that doesn't happen again. But when you're up against Blink Stalkers, it's especially important that you don't give away these Swarmhosts. Okay, now the other thing that he did that's really cool, actually. Now, he blinks up. This is a huge mistake. We know how this is going to pan out. But the other thing he did that was really cool is you saw earlier he was actively targeting my Overseers. And I didn't notice it for quite a while that he had sniped my Overseer, so he's had vision of my Swarmhost positioning for a long time. Finally get that corrected, but that's so good for a Blink Stalker user because he's able to, position himself as such that he's able to dodge the locusts and effectively have map hack till you get that up. So try to learn from my mistake here and recognize when your opponent is deliberately sniping Overseers. They're kind of banking on you making a mistake. It's the only way I can put it. Almost got that Nexus, super close. They're kind of banking on you making a mistake because if they snipe the Overseer, are forced back, and then you make another Overseer, more than likely they traded a couple Stalkers for one Overseer, which is a bad trade. But in this case, they sniped the Overseer, I don't notice, for 2 minutes or so, and it resulted in him getting like 6 to 8 Swarmhosts as a result from the intel. Alright, so at this point I'm trying to... Oh, this is that... I gotta figure out what this is. And so, what better time than right now? Because his Nexus is almost dead, right? And we're going to do this from my angle because I really want to see what my commands are. And I've looked at this so many times, but maybe this one will show us something. Otherwise, I really suspect this is a bug. So the Locust spawn, we're going to go back once more. I want to see my rally. Because this would have gotten the Nexus. Okay. Cool color changing Swarmhosts. Locust spawn, they are rallied. All is well. They're moving, they're moving, they're moving, they're moving. I do not select them. And they... What is that? I mean, I never once selected them. I had my queens selected, had my Swarmhost selected, but I was watching them the entire time. I never once selected my Locust. And we saw the rally. It was right down here. I don't know. I'm going to watch it one more time. I'm sorry for anyone who's bored by this, but I see this all the time. I'm just going to do 2-speed here. I just want to make sure I didn't somehow select them. I did. Okay. So, I think I know what occurred here. I recognized his Nexus was low, sent him on a focus fire, switched back over to my Queen and Swarmhost, and actually right-clicked the command for the Queen with the Locust still selected. And I do that, I mean, every other game. And that's actually what happened. I've been thinking this was a bug all along. So that's something that's really good to be able to spot because that's a case where I'm trying to play too fast. I'm not taking my time and making sure that is done correctly because this spawn could have been used to damage his army rather than having to focus specifically on his Nexus. Those little subtle things I find are what really can punish you for Swarmhost play. Because you'll have these little miss-micros that occur regularly, and your good opponents, they're going to be able to capitalize on them. Or even if they don't capitalize on them, it's going to be a case where you're hurting your efficiency in one way or the other, like I did where I just wasted that previous spawn. Now, though, we've got his Nexus down. Economically, he's in rough shape. Let's check out production. Still committing to Swarmhosts, getting down a Hydra Den and a Roach Swarm, because I do predict eventually I'm going to need to move out of such a heavy queen composition. I do like this many queens, but when they die, I find in certain stages of the game you're better off to replace them with Roaches and Hydras so that you can get them right up front. If there were queen rally points, I don't think that would be a factor, but it just takes so much attention to get that corrected. Alright, so at this point I'm recognizing he's going to go ahead and start scooting around the top, and if we switch it over to his view now so we can see this, we see he hasn't taken his replacement third yet, but he is going to go ahead and expand vertically. Now I've double expanded to my 4th and 5th. Really would like to see this right here going down significantly sooner. I've been at a healthy mineral count for quite some time. Been hovering right around 200 supply. I think what I should have probably done is dumped my remaining supply into queens. Made sure these aren't idle. Big mistake. and had these spines up quite a bit sooner, because anytime they're into blink stalkers, you can expect this kind of response, and this is exactly where they should be heading with their response. They're pulling my army back. I could have put my... see, I had to cancel all that. I could have put my Swarmhost back in his natural, but at this stage of the game, I feel like that's a gamble I can't afford to make. If I had a little bit more resources in the bank and I could afford to lose my Swarmhost, then I would go ahead and put them right about here, send half of them up top, half of them to his nat, and do some guaranteed damage. But in this case, it just feels like I could lose that entire Swarmhost army and not have enough to replace it, and so it's just not worth the risk, because as we see, he does have some stalkers, and I don't know what transition he's making at this time. It does turn out he's making a Colossus transition, so depends on how much he had back home, but it's just oftentimes I find it to not be worth the risk. Trying to get some spines up, and he's being pesky. He's going to go in and force another cancel on these. But at this point, I'm already up front, and I'm feeling committed. So I end up leaving, I believe, a portion of these back. And I think this is a good way to compromise. And I'm just kind of talking through where my thinking was at, honestly, at this point. Since this game was fresh enough, I can kind of mention where my head was at in this. So at this point, I'm saying, you know what, I am super heavy on Swarmhost. Like, I am at, let's see, 31 Swarmhosts. What that means is I can afford to lose 8 to 10. I feel like I can lose 8 to 10 Swarmhosts right now, and as long as I trade some buildings or units for it, no harm, no foul. So what I do is I go ahead and leave a chunk of my Swarmhosts here, about 10 or so, 13 actually, and then the remainder are going to come back to help defend. Now, realistically, the Queen Roach may have been able to do the trick. I'm not entirely sure, but I don't feel like necessarily all of my Swarmhosts were required to do some good, solid damage as natural. So I figure I would rather get some Swarmhosts into position to start cutting off these stalkers if possible. Because right now they're just dancing all over my base. I even had to produce an extra Roach Warren and an extra Hydro Den just to make sure I don't lose some important tech. Alright, so we get them pushed out. All the while I'm just shuffling up. These I've pretty much marked as expendable. So if they die, so be it. But I would like them to, most importantly, do some guaranteed damage, and we have that with that Nexus dying. Now you might say, well, they're about mined out. Not entirely. They've got 800 gas on each of those assimilators, and right now Protoss is in a place where he needs gas more than minerals. Now he needs both, but especially with where he's trying to move into Colossus, he really needs that gas. Alright, so he surprises me with, turns out, I think I saw 1 at one point, but he randomly turns it into 4 because he had switched into double robo. So that's pretty good. But now I'm finally on my side of the map, and I do have pretty healthy spine coverage here. Would like to see those that I was attempting to produce replaced, though. And thus far, he's just buying time with that time warp. So, pretty good play. Lost a bunch of swarms, but again, those are the ones I had kind of deemed expendable because I was at 30. As long as I stay over 16, I'm happy with that count. So, finally cleaned up the idle drones. Need to really watch that, because I get so caught up with my micro, speaking of micro, giving away Swarmhosts. And I did that blind. That's really the issue. I was planning on moving up and just getting an easy snipe on that Nexus. But I imagined he was moving up. Basically, I tried to read that he was moving up and trying for a run-by again with his stalkers, and it turns out he was not. Okay, so this one I should have caught. We'll go ahead and go back here. 3 Infestors, believe it or not. And I've had them building up for a little bit here. And even without the Locusts available, these are just doing a world of good, because they're allowing my Queen Roach to trade directly with his Stalkers, or with his Colossi, and all the while his Stalkers are busy running away from my Locust spawn, which almost cleaned up that third. So I feel like this is, this is something that was actually recommended to me by a lot of viewers and a lot of people reading my forum thread, and I said, you know what, that's a really good point. I don't like Infestors versus Protoss, but a couple just to get some guaranteed damage to force them to trade with your Locust, or in this case, just force them to trade with my superior numbers of Roach Queen. It's phenomenal, because the issue with this composition is mobility, and if you can guarantee that you're going to catch them out of position, then why not? Alright, so we've got Viper transition occurring here. These never got a chance to nom on some buildings, but they're ready to abduct, and that's the important part. All the while, what I'm trying to do here is just split him off. I mean, he's basically lost the game. He definitely could have left a while ago, but he's fighting to the bitter end, getting stubborn. So what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that since he's into Colossus now, and he's basically putting all of his production into it, I'm just trying to make sure that I try and keep him split off on his blink stalkers. So he's trying to scoot back, trying to catch some of my rally, trying to break free. And I actually thought he maybe had the 4th at this point, but he did not, and I find that out now. Meanwhile, I've got some of those Vipers getting ready to go ahead and start cleaning up these stalkers. Maybe should have, since I didn't have anything for these to consume, maybe should have just grabbed 1 Colossus per locust spawn, with my Swarmhost count being a little low at this point, because what that did when I grabbed all 3 was it basically split my already low locust DPS amongst 3 stalkers, or 3 Colossus. So I ended up only killing 1 Colossus anyways. So that's kind of just a little efficiency thing I need to keep in mind. Sometimes being able to rattle off a whole bunch of abducts, even though it feels cool, is not necessarily the best choice. That actually happened in my game against Tuck as well. Abducted his entire army, and it just put him in really good position. Even though it felt awesome to pull off like 12 abducts at once. Alright, caught a little bit of damage here, but again, this is a case where those Infestors would have been great. Actually, the one thing that's tricky is I have to move my Infestors off of Control Group 1 once my Vipers are out. I may shift that. Maybe I'll put Vipers on 2 so that my Infestors can stay on 1. I'm not sure. 1 is always my default for Infestors. So basically what happened was once the Vipers were on 1, I pressed 1 to select my Vipers and put them into position, but my Infestors were now on 2. Well, no, I'm sorry. My Vipers had not yet been switched at that point, and I basically took the Infestors and moved them into his army. That was a while back. So it's just kind of hotkey shenanigans I got to get used to with having both Viper and Infestor out, because they both, in my mind and in muscle memory, are assigned to the same hotkey. And that obviously won't be functional, since they function in entirely different ways, and one's air and one's ground, so I would never really want them in the same control group. And some good abducts here, just finishing this up. I feel like really he did lose the game a while ago. What a joke strat. Always good to know. But I thought this was a good one to show because a lot of Protoss players in particularly were saying, well, how do you beat it? And I feel like what Nib did was correct. It's just, I feel like the execution wasn't quite there. I mean, he goes for the stalker run by, and he snipes none of my tech buildings. And that's the kind of thing that, it just, for me, he had the right idea, but what he needs to be doing is first off sniping the infestation pit, and then the Hydra Den and Roach Warren will be great if possible. The other thing is, once he's got that Robo facility out, which was very early, he got it for the detection, there's nothing stopping him from getting just 1 Warp Prism and starting to do, 8 Zealot Warp Ends or something to that effect. So if the Stalkers are up here vertically hitting my 3rd, or hitting my vertical 4th, then he can have a Warp End down here cleaning up. And eventually, when I start chasing him around, he can go ahead and blink over to the Zealot Warp in and converge with his other army, and have some decent mass until my Swarmhosts arrive. So there's a lot there for him to improve, but I thought in the back of the mind the concept was correct. So since this was a current game, I figured it was a good one to cast. I'm going to try and catch some more, maybe Sky Toss next for my ZVP, and then I also have a ZVT lined up. But a lot of people are saying they want to see more of the Swarmhost versus Sky Toss play, because that is a lot of fun, I got to admit. Alright, so thanks a bunch for everyone watching, and I will see you guys all in the next cast.